everyone. Glad you're here. I'm really happy to introduce Jim Storhoff, who's Executive Director of the Wichita Symphony. For those of you who've been in Wichita for a lifetime, you know the tremendous value of the Wichita Symphony. It's starting its 81st year, which is amazing. Tim is in this is your second year in this position?
Yeah, just over a year in.
So welcome to WSU Retiree Association, and he'll introduce himself and tell a little bit about his background. But please help welcome Tim Storhoff.
Thank you all so much for having me. As Linda said, I'm Tim Storhoff, just over a year in here in Wichita. Came from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, just over a year ago, where I was working with the Winston-Salem Symphony there, doing fundraising and marketing. But I wanted to just give you a little insight on sort of where I'm coming from, my background, and then we'll talk a little bit about the history of the Wichita Symphony, the rich connections that the symphony has with Wichita State, and then look a little bit at sort of the season that's coming up, some of the interesting things that we're trying to do, and maybe some concerts that y'all will be interested in attending. So my background, I started out as a saxophone player up in Fargo, North Dakota, so I'm a Midwesterner at heart. In high school, often band conductors are taught to find certain saxophone players or clarinet players and strong arm them into becoming bassoon players, and I was one of those that was selected because you need those double reed players in the ensembles. And I guess I liked it because I went on to be a bassoon major in college, went to the University of Iowa, and studied bassoon performance there. But while I was there, I kind of fell out of love with classical music in a way. I felt like we were just playing for each other. The people out in the audience didn't seem to sort of reflect the people that were playing, if there were people out in the audience at all. And I sort of found my way decided I'm going to go study world music. So I went to grad school to become an ethnomusicologist. Are you all familiar with that term? It's essentially the anthropology of music. So I wrote a master's thesis on hip hop culture and competition, so as far away from classical music as you could get. And then I did my dissertation on U.S.-Cuban musical relations and musicians traveling back and forth between the U.S. and Cuba, while that was quite challenging to do and still is. But while I was doing that, I sort of found my way back to classical music in a couple ways. One of them was doing that research. I went and saw the National Symphony Orchestra of Cuba go on their first U.S. tour, and it started actually in Kansas City at the Kaufman Center, and it was a pretty new place at that point. It was in 2012, and they started this tour of the nation there, and it was fascinating to see the people that came out to support this, and some were there for the music, but a lot of people were there just to support this sort of bringing together of two cultures, two nations, and it was fascinating to see how music can connect even neighboring countries that are worlds apart. So there was that going on, and while I was working on my dissertation, I started working for the Florida Arts Council. I was at Florida State University, so in Tallahassee, state capital, ended up becoming a state bureaucrat while getting that document finished. And giving out grants throughout the state, was able to see some of the work that these different nonprofit music organizations, specifically symphony orchestras, were doing in their communities, and how it went so far beyond what I kind of initially thought, even as a musician myself. So that was the way I made my way into kind of the arts administration world and left academia behind as much as I love it. And went from there to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, was there for 6 years, and then was ready for the next thing, and was thrilled when I saw the opening with the Wichita Symphony. So it was just over a year ago, July of 2024, that I think it was maybe even the end of July, first weekend of August, that flew me out here. And just a couple days later, I said yes, and it was the craziest time, because in about 2 weeks, we put our house on the market, came back here to find a house, did all that stuff, and my wife was 8 months pregnant at the time also. So that added some stress to all that, but we have been thrilled to be in Wichita now for the last year. And part of when I knew I was going to go on the job market, I wanted to make sure that any orchestra I went to would be one that I would be proud to be associated with. And as soon as I found some recordings of the Wichita Symphony online, you can find some of our young people's concerts that were done digitally during the pandemic. So those are still up and anyone can go view those. But once I heard that orchestra, I knew, yes, this is a group that punches above their weight. I don't think people understand how amazing of quality of musicians we have here in Wichita, Kansas. So it's been great getting to know those musicians now and the team that we've got on staff. It helped. Last year was our 80th anniversary, so we were diving into the history of the organization quite a bit, and that was sort of a good trial by fire for me in a lot of ways, learning about the orchestra going way back to 1944 when we were founded, and some of those histories and how they tie into what the orchestra looks like today. So yeah, 1944, there had been a few attempts to form a professional symphony orchestra in town here before, and they'd all sort of fallen through. There were some like right at the beginning of the 1900s, some in the 1920s. And it was, again, in 1944, which is a time when a lot of sort of medium-sized communities, as the war was wrapping up, were these attempts to form symphony orchestras, because I think the men would be coming back, sort of women leaving the workforce, and cities, Wichita, knowing that the economy would maybe be changing, sort of getting out of the defense spending and wanting to attract people here. And having a symphony orchestra was a way to say, we are a real city, and to attract people. So it was business leaders that sort of came together with the university at the time, making sure that those musicians were on board. And part of what made it successful at that time was they worked with the musicians union. I think some of the earlier attempts, there was sort of a combative stance right out the gate. But this time in 1944, they said, let's sit down together and come up with a plan to make this work. They hired someone to run the organization very early on instead of having it be all volunteer run, which I think also helped quite a bit. And right out of the gate, it was a pretty successful thing. They had some performances at the old Forum, but the primary home of the Wichita Symphony was, I guess it was Wichita High School at the time, but what's now East High School, and played there until Century 2 opened in 1969. Can go back to some of our early efforts in music education. We have these young people's concerts. Those started in the early 1950s while we were still at East High School, and they actually had to stop doing them because they realized that we were going way beyond the capacity, like the legal limit of having the number of people in that building at any one time, because they were busing people in from really all towns around Wichita, plus all the students that were already there for school, and they kind of had to stop doing those for a couple of years until we got into Century 2 and had a bigger space. So we've had that music education connection for a long time. Our youth orchestras program will be celebrating its 80th anniversary here in just over a year. That started in 1947, so that's coming right up. So I think it says a lot that it wasn't decades later that the Wichita Symphony decided to step into music education. It was right out the gate, knowing that this is really important and a part of what our mission is, and it's been that way ever since. I want to talk about a few of those WSU ties. So I mentioned the founding, sort of having the involvement of faculty at that point. The symphony's first attempt to get involved in sort of pops concerts, which at that point was Rodgers and Hammerstein and that type of thing. Those were, I think they were called dollar concerts at the field house. So you could pay $1 and they filled up the field house and did these for a few years. Those were underwritten by Koch Industries way back then, and it was a great way for the symphony to reach out and get to a wider audience. So that was us being on campus then, and we have regularly had musicians who are faculty members playing in the orchestra. That's been sort of an official / unofficial thing for a number of years, but often the principal string musicians have been the faculty at WSU, and we've still got some of those ties, which I'll point out here in a second. But I think one piece that I want to emphasize about the Wichita Symphony and why we're I think, important to Wichita State, to the community at large, is in a lot of ways we're sort of the musical engine of the community. There are so many performing arts organizations here, but they are often sort of pulling and wanting to make sure that their dates don't conflict with the Wichita Symphony date, because they want the best musicians in the pit for their performances and for what's going on. And even if it's not officially a Wichita Symphony ensemble playing at those, it is members of the Wichita Symphony that are making sure that these other organizations have the best music to go with them. So whether it's finding a string quartet for a wedding, or putting on opera, musical theater, ballet, it is Wichita Symphony musicians that are there. And we're also an outlet for the best music teachers in our community, whether it's at the university level or the high school, middle school level. They get sort of they're able to exercise their artistic muscles by coming and performing with the symphony. It's what allows them to do what they love and still be connected with that art form beyond as an instructor. So you sort of keep them at the top of their game as teachers by giving them something to do on stage and continue to be interested in the music. With that WSU connection, a couple of the people that you'll see on stage today: Timothy Jones, our associate concertmaster; Catherine Consiglio, she is a violist. She just retired last year, but she's still performing in the Wichita Symphony. Dr. Leonid Shukayev, so he is a principal cellist, cello professor, and he's going to be featured on a concert in January as a soloist. And then our bassist, Mark Foley, many folks know him, and he is one of those musicians that is so multi-talented in different genres. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget that the musicians that you see in an orchestra, some folks are only kind of classical music, tried and true, but so many of our musicians do so much different styles of music. Just this last weekend, we had Dr. Timothy Jones playing for an event. He left his violin at home. He was on the keyboard playing bossa novas. So there's so much talent in this community, and so much of it comes from that WSU connection. And I think we help WSU attract top quality faculty members, because they know they can keep playing, have that professional orchestra experience by being part of the Wichita Symphony also. In the woodwind section, Rochelle Goder, she's our clarinet; Zach Haig, bassoon; Jim Pisano, saxophone. You'll find them in the halls here all the time. In the brass section, Jeb Wallace in horn; David Hunsicker on trumpet; and then percussion, Jerry Scholl. So it is, if WSU was not here, the Wichita Symphony would be hurting, and I think it really does go both ways. It is a symbiotic relationship that we depend on each other, and kind of when one thrives, so does the other. Our Wichita Symphony chorus, any singers in the room? If you haven't sung in a while and you want to join the Wichita Symphony chorus, please do. Ryan Beacon is our chorus director, and he is the head of choral studies here at Wichita State. They've got a concert coming up in the end of October, and I love what Ryan has come up with for this, because it is about bringing the whole community together, which is something I'm focused on with partnerships, because it's not just the Wichita Symphony Chorus, it's also his students from WSU that will be joining. It's also the Butler Community College Chorus, and it's the Wichita Children's Chorus. So I think we've already sold enough tickets, so we're guaranteed to have more people in the audience than singing, but that was one of those where it was like, oh man, is the hall just gonna be full of everyone who's performing? But that's gonna be a lot of fun, and again, it's one of those really important connections that we've got with Wichita State. The education side of things I spoke about a little bit. So if you go to the music building on campus on most Sunday afternoons and now Monday evenings, it is bustling with middle school and high school kids because of our youth orchestras program. We are now up to serving over 300 kids. We have 6 ensembles. 2 new ensembles were added last year, so we've got 4 orchestras. So 2 of them are full orchestras with strings and winds. 2 of them are strings only for the younger students, and one of those was new because kind of the introductory group was bursting at the seams, that we had to divide it into 2 and have an introductory group and then a chamber strings. And we have 2 bands. We have a concert band aimed mostly at middle school, kind of early high school, and then we have a wind ensemble. And that's been great for reaching further out into the community. There is so much great band and wind repertoire that people aren't necessarily familiar with, but kids love to play this. Dr. Timothy Shade, who's the director of the School of Music, he won the job. He'd been running our wind ensemble, but now he won the job as the director of our youth symphony. So he's conducting our top youth orchestras program. So that is really a key part of what we do, and it's great because it connects with the orchestra musicians on stage in a number of ways as well. They'll rehearse as a full ensemble for a while, but then they will break up in and do sectionals, and it will be those professional musicians that you see on stage at the orchestra concerts, many of whom are WSU faculty, that are then working with those students in small groups so that they can really master their instruments. And we have a wide range of students. Some of them are already taking private lessons. Many are not, and this gives them some instruction to really work on those basic skills on their instruments to move up, and to ensure that we are really making this program accessible to anyone who is interested and qualified. This last year, we've started offering tuition waivers to anyone who qualifies for free and reduced lunch at their school. If they successfully get into the program, they can participate. We don't ever want to turn any young person away because of financial reasons. So that's been huge, and that's an important thing to me, to make sure that we are staying accessible to everyone in this community. So that's sort of for that middle school to high school range, but we want to get kids interested much earlier. There's a program that we rolled out. It started a couple years ago. They were calling it Symphony Summers. We've dubbed it Symphony Storytime this last year, and it's still primarily focused during the summers, but aimed at really kind of ages 3 to 7 or so, maybe early elementary school. We were at 20 different libraries and community organizations this last year. So in addition to public libraries, we went to Big Brothers Big Sisters, we went to Heartspring, a few different places like that. We added in some bilingual performances, some sensory-friendly performances, again, to ensure that we're being accessible to people from all walks of life in the community. These were completely free. We get at least sort of 2 string players, usually a violin, and then a lower instrument, whether that's viola, cello, bass. And then we have someone from the woodwinds, someone from the brass, and a percussionist. So all the kids who come get to learn about all the instrument families a little bit. They hear a story, and this year it was a story about a kid trying out all these different instruments. So kind of as we're reading the book, they hear the different instruments. And then it gets a little chaotic at the end because we pass out egg shakers to everyone who's there and invite them to play along with us as they perform Baby Shark, which gets them all very excited. But we reached over 1,000 kids with that program this year, over 600 adults that were with them. And we're already booking up dates for next summer because these libraries are calling and saying, and it's really been some of the libraries just outside of Wichita Public Libraries where we saw the huge attendance. I think Park City, El Dorado, some of these they called and said, like, we haven't had that many people come to an event that we've had before. Can we get on your calendar for next year? So we're already figuring out next summer. So we're trying to reach the younger kids, get them interested in music at that point. And then while they're in elementary school, we invite young people to come to our young people's concerts. We do these twice a year. We do them now in November and in January. And this is that program that I said was getting the high school over capacity back in the early days. But we had over 12,000, just about 12,000 kids come to that this last year. And we do them each session over 2 days. So the orchestra will rehearse Monday night, and then we do 2 performances on Tuesday morning and 2 performances on Wednesday morning. And the way we're able to sort of make this work financially is the orchestra agrees, since it's a short performance, if we can get sort of 2 performances within a 2.5-hour orchestra service, we'll just pay for the 1 service instead of for 2 performances. So that means you've got a tight window to get all these kids who come at the first performance out and back on their school buses, and then get all the next ones back in before the next performance starts. It is the most fun type of chaos. If you ever want to come volunteer, like, I encourage you to come be a part of one of these, because it is incredibly fun to see the kids walking out of there just, and they will be honest with what they thought about it if you ask them. But for many of these kids, this is their first time seeing live music like this, coming to Century 2, seeing a full orchestra. And we have buses coming from a ways out. We had a bus drive from Pratt. These kids were on the bus longer than they were in the concert. But it's a reminder that we are serving not just Wichita, but really the whole region of kind of South Central Kansas, because we are the musical core that's here. So we've got that, and hopefully then those kids are inspired to pick up an instrument as they sign up for middle school and go on to perform something, and maybe we'll see them in our youth orchestras program. I think I've hit on most of what I wanted to tell you about the symphony itself. I mentioned the chorus, just to hit on that. That's a all volunteer group, and so the size varies quite a bit from sort of semester to semester, year to year. I think we had about 140 people, just under 140 people on stage last spring singing Beethoven 9. So I think it sort of depends, what are we going to be singing that gets people interested or less interested. I think we're at about that same number for the Mozart concert that I mentioned coming up at the end of October. And I love the symphony chorus because it does bring people together from, again, all walks of life. You have people who have just graduated from Wichita State that still want to keep singing for Ryan Beacon. So they're now doing this while they're in town and, you know, starting their professional careers, alongside retirees, people who all the way in between. And it's, God bless Ryan's heart for the work that he has to put in for kind of getting that group together, because it is a big group, and there aren't that many rehearsals meeting once a week. You know, you start maybe at the end of August, if not September. And we talked about some pieces, and he's like, well, we'd have to learn a piece almost each week to get ready for that. And sometimes that's the way it goes, and it always comes out wonderfully. And I love that spirit of community that comes out of a group like that. And everyone always just raves about working with him. And then when you get to put them on stage and get the conductor on there, often for the big concerts where it's with the full orchestra. So Ryan sort of prepares them, and then Daniel Hagee, our music director, steps in and kind of takes over for that dress rehearsal and the final concert and everything. And it's always a really, really special moment to be able to do that. I want to hit on a couple other things with sort of getting out in the community with partnerships like that. One of the new things that I've sort of rolled out and that we're trying this year is a new series called WSO Connect, and there was just a slide up here of a solo violinist with some projections behind him, and that was a program in that series last year. We were able to get out to Friends University for that. Part of the logic for this is I'm trying to find more work for our musicians, trying to find things that guest artists, when they come in, that they can do that's interesting, that gets us out of Century 2 to some different places that may be more accessible to different groups of interest to others, and that also allows us to be a little more flexible. It's not a series that we announce in February for the coming year. I think the first concert for it, we were at this, if you're familiar with Somewhere Works, that opened last year down on Emporia Street. It's kind of a recording studio, really a hub for, it's made more for kind of indie rock bands and that type of thing. But we got word that there was going to be a group from sort of the Brazil-Argentina border doing a U.S. tour. I found out about this in the spring, kind of got confirmation beginning of June, and then we said, okay, yeah, mid-July, let's do it. Like a 6-week turnaround is that is very outside the normal for classical music organizations. My my head is fully in 2027 right now, but being able to add in these opportunities where if something comes up that we can seize on it and do it. So we were at Somewhere Works, sold it out for, it was their first time doing a seated event like that, and figured out that we figured out what their capacity actually was and had to have a few folks standing. But that was great that it turned out so well. I had no idea if there would be an audience for Brazilian music / classical chamber music on a Monday night in the middle of summer in Wichita, and it turns out there was. So that was great. We had the one just the other week ago that was at Friends University with projections, and then it's for something completely different here in just under 2 weeks. We've got a soloist, Michelle Can, who she's performing Beethoven with the orchestra on Saturday night. On Sunday afternoon, she will be doing a WSO Connect performance on the stage of Century 2, but everyone else will be seated on the stage with her. And she is performing music of the Chicago Black Renaissance. So she won a Grammy recently for recording the songs of Florence Price, which kind of is where she's really, let me restart my slideshow here. She won a Grammy for that and really made a name for herself performing this music of Black American composers that sort of have been forgotten by the music history textbooks. So it's great to be able to have her do one of the core repertoire on Saturday night. And then Sunday afternoon, it's going to be performance, and she's going to talk through this history as well. So it'll be a chance to discover some people you maybe haven't known before and to really lean into her passion point. And I love being able to give guest artists when we have them coming in, like, do what you love, right? And hopefully they love what they're doing with the full orchestra and everything also. But if they've got a side project or something like that that they're excited about, we want to lean into that opportunity. And we'll find some more WSO Connect opportunities in the spring. And part of the idea is let's go to different places, to different venues, see what works, find out what ideas our orchestra musicians have, let them pitch some ideas to us, because often in an orchestra, if you're a music, you're told what to play. The conductor decides, and you're sort of just along for the ride. But if we have someone in the orchestra who has an idea and says, I want to try this, we want to give them the chance to do that. So that's one of the pieces. We've also started doing some smaller fundraisers that are, ask board members or supporters to host these smaller events where we can bring musicians, whether it's in their homes or in different places. We did one beginning of last summer that was a bourbon tasting, and had Jim Pisano, who's in the orchestra, but also as a jazz musician, sort of provide some appropriate music for that. The event where Tim Jones was playing Brazilian music was another one of these this past weekend. So just, again, finding opportunities for us to reach out and connect with the community in new ways that also is supporting the orchestra, but providing work for these amazing musicians that we have. One of the most successful collaborations that we have that I'm excited to continue is Symphony in the Gardens with Botanica. I don't know if anyone has been to that. That is one that I need to find some wood to knock on. Has not been rained out yet. Yeah. And it's such an amazing, that was one of those events that when I was applying for the job and researching Wichita, the Wichita Symphony, seeing that was really a flashing green light for me. It said that there's a spirit of collaboration here between the orchestra and other nonprofit organizations, that there is an interest in trying different things and doing these sort of immersive experiences, because you're able to wander through the gardens of Botanica, hear small ensembles sort of scattered throughout, and then as the sun sets, the full orchestra gathers on the stage, and you get to go hear a fun short concert that ends with fireworks. It's one of those moments that reminded me at kind of the end of the season last year, like, yes, this is why we do this, because it, again, brings a lot of people together that maybe otherwise are not coming into traditional concerts at Century 2. But you should be coming to those concerts. I'm going to pivot now to telling you a little bit about what we've got going on in this coming season. And then I want to hear some of your thoughts, questions, and sort of have a discussion a little bit. So we started just, I guess, over a week ago now. My time is off. But yeah, it was right at the beginning of October was our opening concert. And I just want to share a quote about the violinist that we had. Someone who'd been attending said that, "I've been attending for 40 plus years, and that was the best violinist that I've ever heard." And that includes people like Itzhak Perlman and those who have been here before. So we kind of set ourselves a pretty high standard to try to meet for the rest of the season, but we are gonna try to do that. So that was October 4th and 5th. We had the event at Friends and then full orchestra concert. So coming up at the end of the month, 25th is when Michelle Can will be performing with the full orchestra. This is a meat and potatoes symphony orchestra concert. We've got her performing Beethoven. The Beethoven Emperor Concerto is, so I mentioned my wife was pregnant when we moved. Margot is almost 1 year old. Got this lullaby playlist. And I didn't realize until one of the other day that one of the arrangements on there is from the second movement of the Emperor Concerto. And it just ends like I can't describe it anywhere other than like angelic. It kind of just floats at the end of it. So can't wait to hear Michelle Can play this. I worked with Michelle Can once in Winston-Salem, and I'm thrilled to now be bringing her to Wichita because I know she's going to have everyone so impressed. Then we've got that. And then Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony is the second half of that concert. So this is, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky. The opener for it is a newer composer, Carlos Simon, who wrote a work, Fate Now Conquers, inspired by Beethoven wrote in his journal at one point while he was sort of struggling with hearing loss and all this. He was quoting the Iliad, and he wrote in the margin of his journal, Fate Now Conquers. And it's like that journal entry that inspired Carlos Simon to write this piece. So it sort of all ties in, and there's this theme of triumph and trying to overcome adversity that ties these works together. So that's the 25th and 26th. The staff gets a day off from performances. The orchestra goes right away into rehearsing for that chorus concert. It's a small orchestra for it, huge mass. Ryan Beacon is calling this Masses for the Masses because we have so many singers on this. That's going to be on the 28th, Tuesday the 28th, and that's at First United Methodist Church. So that's going to be a great setting for this, for having all these different voices there. And we're using Mozart's Coronation Mass as kind of the through line for this concert, but there are other settings of the Mass sort of mixed in there, some poetry, some readings. Rick Muma is going to do one of the readings. So it's going to be a really way to sort of tie community together in through this singing, and what better way to do that than by literally bringing voices together. Then mid-November, November 16th, there's a program that we're doing called What Music Is. And Maestro Hagee, he often wants to make sure that we're doing something that leans into visuals. There is at least one concert that has kind of that visual spectacle piece to it. This is that concert. Last year we did one called Warhorse, and there have been a few slides on that Warhorse in concert. So it was the play, but a concert version of it. And that was a wonderful collaboration. We worked with ICT Rep for that. They just did Amadeus. Was that even in this building? Oh, okay. I knew it was somewhere on campus this last weekend. So we worked with them on that. And What Music is sort of our current season concert with a screen, if you will. And it is what it sounds like. We have the narrator, Bill Barclay. He used to be the director of music at Shakespeare's Globe in London, and he's a composer as well, and he is sort of tying in a bunch of traditional repertoire, has music that he's composed that sort of connects it, but he's providing narration over that, and then there are animations that is looking at some of these old ideas of sort of, music of the spheres that the Greeks had and things like that, but there was some reality to some of those ideas that science has borne out. So looking at the science of music, and also how does music work in human culture. It's between an 80-90 minute production straight through. This is going to be a great one to bring families to. I think kids are going to get a lot of kick out of this, as well as any longtime symphony goer. I've sort of been equating it to maybe a Nova or Bill Nye, but plus symphony performance in a lot of ways. And there are these beautiful animations of kind of universe, human body, things like that accompany the live orchestra playing that. So that's going to be a lot of fun, November 16th. We always like to feature some of our musicians as soloists in concert. So I mentioned we're going to have Leonid playing cello concerto in January. So he's doing Haydn cello concerto, and this is one where often Daniel will select, it's this musician's time to be featured, and then he goes to them and says, hey, what do you want to play? I guess Leonid was pretty quick, and he just said, Haydn. Want to do Haydn. So that's what we're going to do. And that concert also has the Brahms Fourth Symphony on it, and I didn't realize some of the background of this until Daniel Heggie, our music director, was talking about it, that this Brahms symphony is what convinced him to become a musician. It's the first piece that he really remembers hearing that made him want to connect with music beyond just being a listener. So there's that sort of personal part of it for him also. In 2026, I was talking about featuring our own musicians. In March, concertmaster Holly Mulcahy is premiering a new piece called Stealing from Birds, which is kind of what it sounds like. Part of the idea is, can we take birdsong and plagiarize that and put it on stage with a full symphony orchestra? So it's been sort of taking these bird songs as inspiration, writing works for it, and it's been a piece that has been ripe for collaborations. We've worked with the Great Plains Nature Center, having some conversations with Sedgwick County Zoo. How can we sort of lean into nature walks, different things where people can experience some of these bird songs in person first and then come see if you can recognize them when you hear the piece. That concert, we're sort of leaning into the flight theme a little bit. We've got Stravinsky's The Firebird on that as well. So that's a big, really exciting piece of music, and have Wagner, the Flying Dutchman, even though it's a ship, but it's got the word flying in it, so we're leaning into it, and it's fun music anyway. So those are sort of where we're featuring some of our musicians. We're doing some celebrations of America's 250th in 2026 with a more classical concert in February, Rhapsody in Red, White, and Blue. So there's a piece called Rhapsody in Red, White, and Blue that is being performed in all 50 states. We're representing Kansas in this initiative, but we also figured you can't call a concert that and not include Rhapsody in Blue, the Gershwin that everyone knows and loves and will expect to hear. So we're actually having 2 piano concertos on that, and it works pretty well because neither of them are that long. So thankfully, Jeffrey Beagle, the pianist who is doing this, is doing both of those. We've got some Charles Ives. I am an American music person, so an unanswered question opens up that concert, which is a great way to, I think, sort of ease into some of this music and to Charles Ives' music maybe. And we've got Bernstein dances from West Side Story, so big, fiery piece. And something special on that concert is Daniel Heggie, his grandfather was a composer, and a number of years ago he was given sort of the sheet music for a piece that his grandfather wrote, but it's never been played by a professional orchestra. The Wichita Symphony collaborated with the other orchestra that Daniel works with out in Binghamton, New York, and we went and had parts made of this. So this piece, Caprice, it's a short work. His grandfather, Boyd Eagle. There aren't many works by Native American composers out there for full orchestra. So we're excited to include this, and it's going to be really important and meaningful for Maestro Heggie to be conducting this for the first time as well. So that's going to be a fun concert. We're doing the America 250 thing in May as well. Byron Stripling he's doing a lot on this concert. He's trumpeter, conductor, singer, and he is someone that orchestras love working with. He came and did a Louis Armstrong show with us a number of years ago. It was maybe like 2017, 2018, I think. Excited to have him back. He's put a show together called America the Beautiful. He's bringing another guest vocalist with him. But he'll be on podium, but I have a feeling he'll turn around and pull his trumpet out at some point and join in some of the songs. So it's gospel, jazz. There's sort of a Sinatra-style swing section in there. It is the more popular side of American music and leaning into that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I mentioned our chorus earlier. There's no bigger way to end sort of our masterwork season than our chorus singing Verdi's Requiem. This is, it could be an opera with how dramatic it is, but it is a Requiem mass. There are movements from this that if you don't know the work, you will hear them and be like, okay, I've heard that in commercials, movies, all this, and it's, we're going to lean into, let's make it big and dramatic and powerful, because it is just one of those pieces that you need to lean into that, and I think everyone's going to walk out thrilled about these things that only live symphony orchestras can do. And that was part of the logic of sort of programming this. Even some of the music that we had on the opening concert, there's, you can feel music in your chest when you go to a rock concert or something like that, but it's different when you're hearing it fully acoustically coming off the stage, and it is just because Jerry Scholl is back there beating the hell out of those timpani drums, and it is just going through the whole orchestra and out into the hall, and those are moments that you can't get anywhere else, and we're trying to lean into those and celebrate those moments. So, why does it matter? Why are we here? I think we are trying to keep our musicians excited, engaged, make sure that we have a strong core of musicians here in Wichita. We are trying to educate the next generation, whether they become musicians or not. Those experiences, performing an instrument, being engaged with music, is going to give them skills and sort of the outlook that is going to set them up for success the rest of their lives. And just making sure that there is something here for when people retire from Wichita State, that you will say, you know what, I do want to stay in Wichita, because there is so much to do and there's great music here. We want to make sure that we have those opportunities and that we are continuing to make this a wonderful place to live and a vibrant community. And I think we're off to a pretty good 81-year start on that front. So thank you all so much for having me. I want to answer your questions or talk about any topic that you want to sort of dig into a little bit here.
I think Donna had a really good question.
Yeah.
Before we started your talk about the problem in society now is that attendance at a lot of formal events is, you look out and you don't see very many young people. So how are you guys addressing that problem and getting younger people into the concert hall?
I think that's a industry-wide problem, and it's beyond just even the performing arts industry. Churches are dealing with this. That just getting people to leave their homes and go to things is getting harder and harder, because everyone's got these things in their pocket, and it's so easy to engage any entertainment you might want from the comfort of your couch. And I think it's part of, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but I think part of the problem of what we're sort of facing in this country is the lack of people going out and connecting with one another. Part of what I love about classical music is that we are a place where you will find people in that hall from broad spectrum of political beliefs, but they are sharing space and engaging in something together. And we don't have these third spaces in American society to the level that we used to, that people are actively engaging with them. So I think it's important that we continue to try to solve this and get more people in. I think for getting young people in the door, we can't depend on the repertoire to do it. We can't say, oh, hey, we're going to play Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony and hope that people are like, oh boy, I'm going to come out for that, because there's a good chance that a lot of the people that we're trying to reach don't know this music. So we need to make sure that we are offering an experience that people want to come to. And I do believe that once someone comes into the hall, most of the time they are going to walk out saying, actually, I did enjoy that. I didn't know what to expect, but I would love to come back. But I think part of the way we can get people to come back is adding more social experiences onto the concert experience. I've noticed sometimes it seems like with like theater, there will be an event, and then after it's over, like there's often a party, and people, the cast and crew and audience are sort of getting together. Sometimes it feels like with classical music events, everyone has this sometimes even transcendent experience in the concert hall together, and everyone just silently walks off their separate directions. It's like, no, let's get together and talk about what we just sort of experienced and did. So our concertmaster, Holly Mulcahy, she's been good about setting up a few kind of post-concert hangs, even if it's just sort of saying, hey, some of the musicians are going to be out at this bar or this restaurant after the concert. Anyone who wants to is welcome to come out. And that's been a good way to engage and have some conversations. And I think it has been successful in getting some of those folks to come back. We're trying to be intentional about telling our current audiences, please bring a friend. Take a friend to the orchestra. Maybe you know people who have been before. If it's been a while, just make that effort to invite them. Because I think in a lot of ways it is one of those experiences where an ad isn't necessarily going to do it. But if someone knows that someone who they trust, who's in their sort of friendship circle, if that person goes to the symphony, that sort of gives it the seal of approval and will get them to come and attend as well. But we're trying to remind people, like, please, like, just make that effort. We almost need to get that word of mouth chain going because it's not going to happen necessarily on its own. And then leaning into the experience, having this concerts with screens. Some people are worried, like, ooh, do I just have to sit there and listen to music for 2 hours? Like, do you have to concentrate and be focused that whole time? Like, adding some concerts where there is that visual element. In my concert overview, I neglected to mention our Valentine's concert, which is Tango Caliente. We're going to have tango dancers at the front of the stage. We've got bandoneon player, the Argentinian accordion. So that's going to have that visual flair because those dancers are literally going to be like back and forth, back and forth. Having some of those concerts where people who may not be sort of classical music aficionados will not just be comfortable but excited to come in and wonder what they're going to experience. So finding those things, and then these concerts and events where I'm trying to get us out of the traditional concert hall because I could go off on Century 2 on its own and some of the challenges we have there with getting people physically into the space creates its own barriers, but also just getting out to other neighborhoods and places where people may be more comfortable going is a way to build some of those relationships, and hopefully then we will see them at full orchestra concerts. So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, the question was if pricing is a barrier for getting families and younger people to come. I think often it can be. I do also think that it is more affordable than a lot of people assume. I think people sort of see these $75 tickets, things like that, and don't realize that we have $29 tickets and $10 student tickets. It's still, for a lot of families, potentially cost prohibitive to bring, 2 adults and a, teen or someone like that. But for a lot of families, it isn't. But I think we are trying to experiment with different models. Sometimes we are hampered by just literally the technology that sells tickets and things like that. But I would love to play with, what does a Netflix model look like in our industry where you just pay a flat amount each month. Right now we've got enough seats for most concerts in Century 2. Like if we had something like that and people could just, you might not get the exact seat you want, but you could come to concerts. That would be a way to make it a little more accessible, affordable. It would be a new revenue stream that we'd need. Having some orchestras have switched to having sort of pay what you can sections and things like that. I think there's different things we can try, and I think that's sort of where we're at. We need to throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Yeah. Yeah, we do offer a free holiday concert. I've got mixed feelings about free concerts, just from a sort of the industry standpoint, that we want to make sure that we are being accessible to everyone in the community. But sometimes it just offering your product for free can devalue it in some ways. And a lot of orchestras make a whole lot of money on their Christmas concerts. And I'm like, oh man. So yeah.
Many years ago, when I was still working, I took private
Music.
Your faculty still offer individual lessons?
I think it varies person to person. I think a lot of the faculty who teach on campus probably have pretty full plates. Often they will sort of pass someone off to a grad student or something like that who's getting started. But so many of the musicians in our orchestra teach lessons. So we are called a per service orchestra. None of our musicians are salaried. It means it's a set rate for each rehearsal and a set rate for each concert. And that means people have day jobs. So you'll see some of our orchestra members, when you're going to get an x-ray or something like that, that might be a member of the orchestra or, so we've got some working in the medical industry, a lot of educators, and some who do make a living as musicians just by gigging with different organizations and teaching lessons in their own studios. Yeah.
Just a compliment in terms of concerts over the recent past. Get a tribute to Aretha Franklin, and that was just one of the most exciting, wonderful musical experiences that I've had. It was great. They had a very mixed audience.
Yeah.
A wonderful connection with the audience. It was really terrific.
We brought that singer, Capathia Jenkins. She was back last week. She did another one called She's Got Soul. I think she maybe squeezed one or two Aretha songs in there, but it was sort of a broader, and I think is everyone who comes to like a music of an Aretha Franklin concert going to be like, this was great, now I'm going to go hear Tchaikovsky? No, but I don't think our mission is not to right. I think our mission includes offering concerts like that. It's not, and the Pops concerts aren't to try to convert people to being classical music listeners necessarily. Different strokes for different folks, and I think we need to serve our whole community.
Tim, can I add one thing?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Number one, Amadeus, I just wanted to add, that's being directed by Julie Longhofer, who also worked with you in Warhorse. She's doing the play Amadeus. Remember the movie 40 years ago? Well, Peter Schaefer is a fabulous playwright, and it's about the struggle between Salieri, who was the court composer, but far less talented than Mozart, and their relationship and how that Mozart died penniless. And it's a fabulous, heartbreaking story, and they're doing it at 25th and Oliver, just down the street here. It's a church, or it used to be a church, but I saw it yesterday. It broke my heart. It was wonderful. And they brought in, they talked with Alan Held and brought in opera singers from WSU to actually sing some of the music live in the play. It was a fantastic experience. They're going to do the same thing next weekend, or this weekend. So if you want to get a ticket and see Amadeus, I'd really recommend it.
So yeah, go see Amadeus, then come hear some Mozart with the Wichita Symphony Chorus. I almost forgot to mention, I created a discount code. Anyone who wants to come, if you're not ticket holders already, for the concert on the 25th where Michelle Can is performing Beethoven, if you use the code WSURA 2025, so WSURA 2025, you can get 15% off. Please, would love to have any of you there. That's going to be one of those transcendent moments. So thank you all so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.